For centuries, historians believed electricity was a modern discovery, something born in laboratories, wires, and power stations of the last few hundred years. But in the dusty soil of ancient Mesopotamia, archaeologists uncovered something that refuses to fit that story. A small clay jar, about the size of a human hand. Inside that jar was a copper cylinder, and inside the copper cylinder, a single iron rod. To many people, it looked like nothing special, but to scientists, it looked strangely familiar because the design looked almost identical to a simple electric battery. This mysterious artifact would later become known as the Baghdad Battery, and if the theories are correct, it could mean ancient civilizations understood electricity nearly 2,000 years ago. The story begins in the 1930s when archaeologists were exploring ruins near Baghdad, Iraq. The area had once been part of the powerful Parthian Empire, a civilization that ruled the region nearly 2,000 years ago. During excavations, researchers found several small clay jars buried in the ground. Each jar had the same unusual structure: a clay container, a copper tube rolled into a cylinder, and an iron rod placed through the center. The top was sealed with asphalt. At first glance, it looked like some kind of storage container. But something about the design raised questions, because copper and iron are two metals that can create electricity when placed in the right chemical solution. In other words, it looked exactly like a primitive galvanic cell, a battery. Scientists began asking an unsettling question. What if this object wasn't just a container? What if it was designed to produce electricity? Experiments soon began. Researchers built replicas of the ancient jar. They used the same materials: clay, copper, and iron. Then they poured in acidic liquids like vinegar or grape juice. The results were shocking. The small jar produced electric voltage. Not a lot, but enough to power small electrical reactions. Suddenly, the impossible seemed possible. Could ancient people have discovered electricity long before modern science? If so, what were they using it for? Some researchers proposed a fascinating theory. They believe the Baghdad Battery may have been used for electroplating. Electroplating is a process where a thin layer of metal is deposited onto another object using electricity. Today, it's used to coat jewelry with gold or silver. But archaeologists had already discovered ancient objects in the region that appeared to be perfectly gold-plated, so perfect that some scientists wondered if simple chemical methods alone could explain it. If the Baghdad Battery generated electricity, it could have been used to plate jewelry, statues, or ceremonial objects. Imagine ancient craftsmen using electricity to coat objects in shining gold, 2,000 years before modern technology. But not everyone is convinced. Some historians argue the jars might have had a completely different purpose. They could have been simple storage containers for scrolls or sacred items. Others believe the jars were used for religious rituals. Still others think the design might have been accidental. After all, ancient civilizations used copper, iron, and clay for many tools. Just because the materials can produce electricity does not necessarily mean that was the intention. But then, more discoveries complicated the story. Similar jars have been found in several archaeological sites across the region. Not just one artifact, but multiple examples, all with the same strange structure: clay container, copper cylinder, iron rod, sealed top. This repeating design suggests something deliberate, something intentional. And if ancient people truly built these as batteries, the implications are staggering. Because electricity changes everything. It means ancient scientists may have been experimenting with invisible forces centuries before modern physics. It suggests lost knowledge, forgotten experiments, and technologies we never imagined existed. But there is another mystery. If ancient civilizations truly understood electricity, why didn't the technology spread?
Why don't we see electrical devices across the ancient world? Why didn't electric tools, lights, or machines appear in history? The truth may be simpler than we think. Even if the Baghdad Battery produced electricity, it produced very small amounts, enough for chemical reactions, but nowhere near enough to power machines or lights. In other words, it may have been more like a scientific curiosity than a power source, an early experiment, a discovery that never fully developed. In over centuries, the knowledge may have simply disappeared, lost to wars, collapsed empires, and the slow erosion of time. History is filled with examples of knowledge being lost: the destruction of libraries, the fall of civilizations, the disappearance of scientific traditions. What seems obvious today may have once been forgotten for centuries. And the Baghdad Battery reminds us how fragile human knowledge really is, because sometimes history is not a straight line forward. Sometimes discoveries are made, lost, and rediscovered again thousands of years later. The ancient world was far more advanced than many people realize. They built massive cities, engineered complex irrigation systems, mapped the stars with incredible precision, created medicines and mathematics that shaped our modern world. So the idea that ancient thinkers experimented with electricity may not be as impossible as it once sounded. Still, the debate continues. Was the Baghdad Battery truly the world's first battery? Or was it simply an ancient object that modern scientists misunderstood? The truth remains hidden somewhere in the past, waiting to be uncovered. But one thing is certain: that small clay jar discovered in the soil of Mesopotamia has changed the way we look at ancient history, because it raises a powerful question. How much knowledge did ancient civilizations really have, and how much of it has been lost to time? Perhaps the past still holds secrets that could rewrite the story of human innovation. Secrets buried in the ground, waiting for someone to ask the right question. And sometimes, all it takes is a simple clay jar to remind us that history may be far more mysterious than we ever imagined.